Call back to order the August 1st work session for Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners and welcome folks from the city of Concord. We don't normally have good food like this at our meeting, but we did that tonight because you're here, and also as a birthday celebration for Commissioner Poole. So, happy birthday. So at this time, I would like to call on Mayor Scott Padgett to handle beginning of his meeting.
Thank you for welcoming us. We're happy to be here and share these exciting plans for our downtown and our county seat, and I think you're going to be very impressed. We think obviously, we can all remember when Concord and most downtowns were dead. They just hadn't been declared dead, but they were. And now we've got so much going on, but I honestly think our best days are ahead of us with some of the projects that I know you already know about. But it's been very good, and things are changing a lot. So thank you, and I will call our meeting to order. And I'll recognize Mr. Hyatt.
We have two presentations for you tonight. Of course, they're interrelated. The first are consultants that Steve Osborne, our Deputy Planning Director, is going to introduce on urban design, and then Margaret Pearson, Planning Director, will introduce our consultants from DFI who looked at the city buildings downtown. So, Steve?
Members of County Commissioners, members of City Council and staff, thank you very much for having us. I am Steve Osborne with the Planning Department. I just want to briefly go over how we got to where we are with the downtown master plan. It's really in three components. The first component was the parking management. Anytime you start a downtown plan, you have to consider parking. We considered it very first. And the parking management, we hired VHB, and that was completed last September in 2015. And they looked at usage, parking opportunities, the need for a deck, and also management strategies for parking. After the parking component, we hired DFI with the School of Government, and they did a market analysis for us. And they looked at the current market conditions, identified the capture rates, and then they broke down opportunities for office, residential, retail, and also looked at the potential for a hotel. With those two complete, staff then worked with Benchmark and put it all together and created the urban design and implementation strategies that you're going to see tonight. And with that, they gathered everything, and the entire process was led by a steering committee. And I have to give a shout out to Jonathan Marshall and Kyle. They served on the steering committee throughout the process, and we very much appreciate county manager, county commissioners allowing them to serve. They were very, very instrumental in the entire plan. Also the clerk's office with the court system, very instrumental, because we have to understand the county operations and the court operations in order to take that into account with any type of plan. So with that, I want to introduce Jason Epley. He's with Benchmark, and Jason's going to start off, then turn it over to Dan Douglas for the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I'll try to be brief. Jason Epley of Benchmark Planning, and Dan Douglas, our Director of Urban Design, is with us tonight. Appreciate the opportunity to address you and bring you up to speed on the Downtown Urban Design Plan. As Steve had mentioned, our process began in February, ran through July for the Urban Design Plan. We conducted listening sessions. We also completed an analysis of downtown. We held design workshops, and then all of that led to the draft plan, and now we're in the plan adoption phase. Next slide. During the course of the plan, we talked with over 60 persons in 15 listening sessions. Those were stakeholder interviews with property owners, business owners, experts with infrastructure, department heads, covered a whole variety of folks during that period. We also had a 4-day design workshop at City Hall with over 120 participants that came out, and those were evening sessions and also sessions during the day. So we received a lot of feedback from those meetings. We also had 220 plus website visits, so that gave the opportunity for people that wanted to learn online could go online and read about the process as well. Next slide. This gives you an idea of the variety of participants and their interests that came to the public meetings between business owners, property owners, et cetera. Next slide. We also had a good representation of longtime residents of Concord and those that have only been here a few years. So I think we had a pretty good distribution of participants during the planning process. So the 5 major themes that emerged, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting into these. We have about an 1.5 inch thick document that goes into all of the recommendations developed for downtown. But really, what we're here tonight to go over is the next slide, which is our development framework that was developed through the process. We've identified 5 catalytic projects. You see number 6 there, some long-term potential. But this was really the meat and potatoes of the plan. Really want to go over that and focus on that tonight. And happy to answer any questions when we're finished. But I'll turn it over to Dan Douglas, our Urban Design Director, who's going to cover that in detail.
Thank you for having us tonight. So the first project is a new Union Street. Some of the feedback we heard through the public meetings is the desire for outdoor dining and wider sidewalks, designed to support both retailers and restaurateurs, a good mix of uses. Of course, parking is always an issue. Easy maintenance repair, we heard from the staff, and that we want to add value to the adjacent parcels, both those that owned by the public and the private. So we asked a few questions. People were wildly supportive of outdoor dining as a way to add life to the street. So here we're going to present 3 concepts, one called the wide side, one called park only, and one called shared. And this is the current street you have today. On the east side, you have the step down. Whoops. You have the step down up there with a 9-foot wide sidewalk. The step down takes up about 2 feet. A 9-foot parking lane, which is quite generous by city standards. A 12.5-foot travel lane. The highway travel lanes are 13, so you're almost at I-85 dimensions. And then on the west side, a smaller or wider sidewalk. You pick up 2 feet on the west side because you don't have the step down. So here it is in section. Here's what it looks like in plan. You need basically a minimum of about 14 feet to do a pretty successful outdoor cafe, and you're just a little bit shy of that today. So the first option we call the wide side option, and this is basically looking at how much space can we take away from cars in the center of the street and the parking lanes and add it to the sidewalks. So in this concept, on the west side, you get a 14-foot wide sidewalk, wide enough for an outdoor cafe. The parking lanes are down really to the barest of minimum at 7 feet. Travel lanes 11, and you get only about 13 feet on the east side of the street because you still have that 2-foot step down. So this is really squunching it in about as hard as you can and still maintaining the exact pattern you have out there today. Here it is in plan, and you can begin to see the preferred sort of outdoor cafe that you see in a lot of cities now is a table against the building and a table against the curb, and you walk through the cafe. The idea that it has to be roped off or stanchioned off is sort of the old way that cafes were done, and there's a lot of good reasons for this. As you're window shopping, when you have retail next to a restaurant, if you're window shopping and you have 6 foot of tables, you move out to go around those, and then you never come back to the windows. So if you think about the mall, you notice there's never anything between your wallet and the door to their store. All the stuff is in the middle so that you don't walk out, because when people walk away from the window, they don't come back to window shop. So we prefer it if there's only a 2-top table about 2 feet against the window so people can still window shop and walk. Here's what an example of that looks like in Greenville, South Carolina. So the next option we call Park One. So in this first option, we made the travel lanes as small as we could, and if we thought about, well, how else can we get some space to widen out the sidewalks, there's really only a few options. In this one, we explored removing 1 lane of parking on the street. And so when you do that, you can still have the 11-foot travel lanes. You can pick up a foot for parking, 8 feet, but now you have sidewalks that are 17.5 feet wide. A really generous sidewalk for an outdoor cafe. And there's another advantage. If you keep a travel lane on the east side where the step-up is, you can put a rail and have a some planting there, and do away with the step down. So there'd be just a couple places where you can get up onto the sidewalk, but you don't have that step running the whole length of the street. Here it is in plan. And in that case, now that the sidewalk's getting wider, you can start to have bigger tables, bigger groupings of tables out by the curb, and really have a generous walkway. This is the example. This is Winston-Salem's Main Street. They went to park one side, I think about 10 years ago, Jason?
Roughly.
And have had pretty good success with it. Here, unfortunately, they still have the idea that you have to have a stanchion, around a cafe. So in this setup, that's the only space reserved for the pedestrian, is that little piece out by the curb, and that's really not how you want to treat your potential shoppers and diners. So the last one, we thought somebody challenged us to go, well, what's the biggest we could get? And so we call this the shared street. It's kind of an emerging new streetscape design that you see in a few places around the country. There's only, I think, one or two in North Carolina. Wall Street in Asheville, if you're familiar with that street. So this is a street where you send the signal that the pedestrian is the most important thing. There are no curbs on the street, there's no parking on the street, and there are bollards that separate the travel lanes from the sidewalk. And so this, in the paving from the sidewalk, or a higher detailed paving, can go right across the street. And this is where you tell people you can cross anywhere you want, you can walk anywhere you want, and you send a big signal to people driving that this is a place for pedestrians first, the car comes second. And in this scenario, you get, I think it was 22.5-foot wide sidewalk, so now you're able to have 2 rows of tables out by the curb. You have out by the edge of the street, you have just one travel lane in each direction, bollards separating that lane. And we recognize that you still need parking, and people want to be able to get out of their car and go right into the restaurant or start shopping. So one way to solve that problem, a lot of cities are doing, is valet parking. So you have a common privately run valet stand on each side of the block along Union Street, and when you come in, you pull in there, you get out. Sometimes they give you that, like you get at the TGI Fridays, that little thing that blinks when your table's ready, something similar to that. And so you can go shop, go see a show, do whatever you're doing, and rather than bring your car back to where you dropped it, they'll bring it to where you are. So if you started maybe seeing a show at the Davis Theater, you ended up with coffee at the bistro, rather than bringing your car back to the theater, they bring it to the bistro where you are. So in many ways, it's more convenient than curbside parking. Like I said, there aren't a whole lot of Main Street examples of that in the United States. This is an example from somewhere in Europe, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Netherlands.
The Netherlands. But you can see no curbs, differential pavement, trees along the edge with bollards that sort of separate the travel lanes from the shopping lanes. And we are not making a recommendation about which one of these options to choose. What we are recommending is that over the summer, as you're considering this, that maybe on the street you could actually model them. You could extend the sidewalk a couple places, spray paint where the travel and parking lanes were, and let the property owners, the retailers, the restaurateurs, the residents come and sort of experience. People have a lot of hard time kind of visualizing what this might look like. So one of the options is to test it and put it out on the street and let people come and see it and see what they think the best solution might be. And what this does, it acts as a catalytic project to add value to the properties along Union Street, the Concord Hotel, Mr. Griffin's property, the Old City Hall, the Annex, and even to some degree the liner building around the potential parking deck. So this streetscape would run from Corbin to the crosswalk just to the north of the library and be about 2.5 blocks long. And we think it will add value to these sites and help to spur the revitalization of those properties. So you're kind of acting like a developer, adding value to property that you already own as a community. So we did a return on investment calculation, and the return for public entities is, property tax. So the streetscape for Union Street, we're estimating somewhere around $1.6 million of streetscape. And if all of these projects redevelop, about $29 million in new private investment, which would return to the county $141,000 a year To the city, to the county, $206,000 a year, $141,000 to the city, and MSD, the Municipal Service District, about $60,000 for an annual return of about $400,000 for an expense of about $1.6 million. So if it comes to fruition that way, the economy stays strong, there's developer interest in these sites, we think that the Union Street streetscape could pay for itself in about 4 or 5 years. The next big project in destination development is Market Plaza. So Concord is growing. You'll probably be over 100,000 by the next census in 2020. And there isn't a real driver of foot traffic in downtown besides the courthouse and a little bit the Davis Theater. And so most cities of your size, they start exploring a performing arts center, Kannapolis, the baseball diamond, or maybe a convention center, some of these things to build foot traffic and help to create demand for retail and restaurant in downtown. What we're suggesting here is that you create a signature destination on what is really a valuable site just behind City Hall, where the old finance building, and I think before that it might have been the jail. The police station, the city police station. And then it focused on events, entertainment, both day and night, a public gathering space with amenities, flexible infrastructure built into it, so if you want to do an event, you don't have to rent and use porta-johns, you don't have to rent generators, all that is built into the plaza. And that it's a flexible program that can be used for many different events throughout the seasons. So here it is. This is City Hall, the new police station, Market Street, Barbrick, and Union at the top. And so we would tear down the finance building and you end up with about an acre, a little over an acre space here. We want to connect it up to Union Street. There's currently a pedestrian alley here. And as part of the redevelopment of the City Hall, we would encourage you to put another pedestrian connection up to Union Street there. They both terminate on some vertical element that draws people from Union down and from the side streets in and even from the Carolina Courts up into the plaza. This kind of becomes a bridge between Carolina Courts and Union Street. So here's a rendering of it in its sort of everyday condition. The plaza level in white is 11 feet below Market Street. And coming off Market are 2 wings at the same level, no steps, no ramps, no nothing. One on the north side and one on the south side. We call them the terraces. And underneath the terraces are the men's room, the women's room, and 4 on each side, 4 garage door, 600 square foot spaces where vendors, the Rotary Club, church groups during events can sell, barbecue, French fries, things like that to help create some revenue in the community. And typically, the owner of the venue takes about 15% of the sales, so it also creates some revenue to help pay down the debt service on the plaza. So up here, we propose a shared street with bollards to help tie the plaza across the street. These are the 2 vertical elements that help draw people in from surrounding areas. A fountain here up at the same level, overlooking the plaza. We call this the lazy stream. It's really just a very shallow fountain that kids can play in and float boats down and play around in when it's hot in the summertime. And then a permanent stage at the west end for concerts and other community events. Here's a view of it now looking from Market towards the stage. 2 access points off Spring Street for the food trucks and the cleanup and the servicing. And then underneath you start to see these rental vending spots. So here it is now set up for a live concert. You can bring in bleachers and put them up on the terrace, create kind of a bowl effect. It will seat about 2,500 people and stand about 5,000. And those are important numbers because when you think about touring acts, rock and roll bands, shows, the 2,500 to 4,000 seats is really the sweet spot for them. So what we're saying is that at this size, you'd be in a position to capture a lot of the touring acts that are, traveling the country in the summer. We have a 5,000 seat amphitheater in Raleigh that does 45 concerts all summer long, draws about 200,000 people into downtown. And after every show, They go out for a coffee, a dinner, so it really starts to feed people into your downtown. Here's a look from up where the fountain is, looking down towards the stage. One of the other possible ways it could be set up is if you have a big art festival or a market. The red are the typical 10 by 10 tents you see set up at all the festivals. It holds about 150 of those, both at the market level, the terrace level, and down in the plaza. And you could still also use the vending spots underneath the terrace. So this really is set up now to take the festivals in downtown Concord sort of to the next level. And here is a view again looking from Market down across the plaza. And then lastly, this isn't just for the summertime, right? This is an ice rink set up inside the plaza for Christmas, the Christmas tree lighting at the fountain. Big winter events, this could be up for maybe 30, 45 days, depending on weather. I think the one in Raleigh is up for 45 days. And between ice rental, hot chocolate sales, sponsorships, it generates about $80,000 a year in those 30 days of revenue. Now here's a view down at the ice skating, looking back up towards the tree and the backside of the buildings on Market Street. Now this could also be used for family reunions, smaller gatherings, class reunions. There's any number of ways. I mean, these booths can be anything. They'll have a sink, and you won't be cooking there, but it'll have the basic functions to be able to do anything. The bathrooms are built in, the electric, everything is already there, so this plaza can be used for anything, things we haven't even thought of yet. One example, we did a plaza like this in Raleigh called City Plaza, and after about 6 months of it being open, this couple called me and said, we want to do a fashion show in the plaza. Some of the students at NC State, textiles, they designed some fashion. I said, oh, of course, we can do that. They put a runway that the ladies walked on, a stage with a screen and loud music, and I thought, that's a lot of effort. Maybe we'll get a couple hundred people. That night, 4,000 people came to a fashion show, and if you'd asked me, I'd have said, that's never going to happen. So the point is, if you put the right infrastructure in place so that a younger group, someone who's not as well capitalized, can do an event without having to rent the generator, the porta-johns, all those things you need to do to put on an event, your town will tell you what some of the best and funnest uses are by trying things. We asked people, did they want that space? They said absolutely yes. And what we think this does is help to stimulate Mr. Griffin's site a little bit on Market, the backside. This is the City Hall site, and if you had an apartment or condo on this corner, you'd basically have a skybox looking over the plaza. We think some new development could occur on Market Street on the back of the Union Street buildings to face this plaza, some little cafes, restaurants that would take advantage of this traffic. And then Mr. Rankin's site, the CESI engineering site, we've met with him several times. He is open and maybe even anxious to redevelop his site and use the terrace in front of it sort of as the front porch for his new building. He's supportive at this point of the idea.
I guess that's important if that's a public space. The concept of whether it's more green or what it looks like in the future, that'll be developed as we move forward.
Yeah, this is a conceptual design.
Yeah.
It hasn't been fully priced out. We just did it at a very high level, but certainly you'll have to hire a group of civil and landscape and designers, urban designers, to work again through the community, figure out, actually meet with folks who want to use this plaza, make sure their needs are met. Currently, it's all hardscape because, if what we're projecting is that you could use it 100 nights a year, and grass doesn't survive 100 nights of year. That doesn't mean that you can't have green space in downtown. You'll see we're proposing another park on the east side of downtown. And there, if you want a front lawn, sort of a green, more pastoral public space, we'll show you how you can do that.
Excuse me, I know we're early in the presentation, but I want to emphasize something the manager said, and I know, Commissioners, you're seeing this for the first time. Well, this is our second time. We have not had any discussion as a council after we saw this about what we see. There's going to be a lot of good ideas in this presentation besides the plaza. I think we have a consensus that there is something that we want, some kind of plaza in our downtown. We think we very much need it. whether it will look like this or sort of like this or nothing like this. I just want to emphasize, we have made no decisions about this.
In fact, this plaza is part of a larger move, looking at potential restoration of the Cabarrus Theater as part of the Hotel Concord project. It ends up being somewhere around 600 seats. The Davis Theater is about 250 or so, I think, right around there. And so if you have a 4,000 seat outdoor amphitheater, a 600-seat indoor theater, and a 250-seat indoor theater, how you manage all three of those, and what we're recommending is that a feasibility study be done by folks in the industry that really understand how these things are programmed, how many nights a year could you get bands, how many nights a year could you get plays and movies in the theater, to look at all those options and do a feasibility to make sure that it all works together, and even maybe promotes a management structure to look at how all three can be managed together to make sure that at any given night, almost any given night, something interesting is happening in downtown Concord, that they really get used a lot. These are your drivers of demand in downtown, and they are amenities that residents really love, that they can walk to these things and live in downtown. So it isn't just about having concerts and entertaining people. It's creating value for the sites around it, creating demand for the restaurants and retailers, and building an amenity base that really attracts new residents. Okay, next one, please. So the Market Plaza early estimate is about 6.2 million. The Market Street streetscape around 1.2. So this one at this early stage is about 7.4 million. It draws about $11 million of private investment. You see the numbers, 80 to the county, 55 to the city, 158 total, but it's important to know that this isn't your only return on investment. For the plaza itself, there's rent, event sponsorship, naming rights, parking revenues, so there's lots of other types of revenues that can be generated by this plaza. With the county's new proposed deck and the city's deck sort of bookending either end, when you charge for parking to people come downtown, that creates a lot of revenue that can help pay off the decks and the plaza as well. Okay, the county parking garage and the city's role in it. This is really trying to think about how do we leverage this public sector investment to maximize private sector development. There's opportunities between the city and county to capitalize on this. You really get sort of one bite at the apple when you're building a big parking structure. It's not like you can come back 5 years later and add another level on top. And parking is what drives downtown development. Typically, they'll look at how much they can fit a parking deck on a site, then whatever's left over gets to be the building. So parking is really integral and critical to incenting downtown development. So we look at this project currently, the county is exploring, and you may know more than I do, exploring a potential liner building, which is residential, against the parking structure. As we mentioned, the City Hall Annex redevelopment, they're not able to park that building on that site, so some of that parking could be in this deck. The city could buy some spaces in this deck. Mr. Rankin's site, that's similar, and then 76 Spring Street to the west of the deck. These are really two key the redevelopment sites that I think are ripe for redevelopment. They'll both probably have one level of parking underneath, but it might not be enough to park fully both those sites. And the beauty of the county deck is it's basically a 9 to 5, 9 to 6 structure. So when all these apartment dwellers are at work, the deck is full of county demand. When they come home at night, the county demand is gone and the residential demand is coming in, so you can double use the parking structure. For a big investment like that, $12.5 million, you prefer to use it 24 hours a day and have it generating revenue 24 hours a day. Shared parking, so a county employee's in the spot during the day and a resident is in the spot during the night. And now with the technology, you can tell when any space is empty or occupied, who's in it and how long. So we can get really efficient at managing this deck to leverage that investment to encourage private investment around it. So the deck is about $12.5 million. The estimate, I think, the most recent one we got. If you look at the liner building, And 76 Spring Street, it can leverage about $35 million in private investment, which returns about $244 to the county, $167 to the city, a total of $482 every year. The last one is the Bicentennial Parking Lot, just over here. We think, and DFI has demonstrated through their marketing study, that we think there's a lot of demand, unmet demand in downtown, and that some of these catalytic projects are going to start to unlock that. That's going to create a rise in values in downtown. So what we're recommending is that the city acquire the spot for a future parking deck at the Bicentennial Plaza. Not that you build it right away, but that you acquire it now when land prices are lower than they will be, hopefully, with a strong economy and this demand being met 5 years from now. We think that it can incent a hotel site, some additional residential site, and an office site that is, in case a large company or a decent-sized company wants to move downtown and have their own building, say 50, 70,000 square feet, where would that go? And this provides a secure future for parkings downtown well out into the future. So you'd have one city deck at the north end, one county deck at the south end, and then another potential city deck in the future over here on the east end, and all of them really connect up great to Union Street. So here is the future Bicentennial site assembled. We're proposing a liner building similar to the one that the county's doing, only here you can come up and be on top of the deck even. Facing church, this is church. The site for a potential office pad for one big user is between the Lofts 29 and the hotel on the old Fifth Surge site there. And then we think one of the best sites for a potential downtown hotel is over here on Means, directly adjacent to the expanded courthouse, the site of your expanded courthouse. So that's about a $6 million private assemblage of parking. Could generate about $37 million, $260 to the county, $178 to the city, for a total of about $500,000 a year. And then last, this is one where we sort of got a little bit outside the boundaries of downtown and tried to think about what is something that Concord could offer that's really unique in the marketplace. And when I say the marketplace, I don't mean just the city of Concord. You're competing with Rock Hill and Gastonia and Kannapolis and all these other ring cities that are about 20, 25 miles from downtown Charlotte. So one of the things we looked at on the site really directly behind us, where the Greenway comes up into downtown, we're here. That's a pretty steep valley. You remember the Greenway does a series of switchbacks to get down there. What if, and the city owns almost all that land on both sides of that valley, what if we made a lake there, a small lake with a greenway around it? And here's where you could have, at the north end of the lake, you could have that green space downtown, maybe with a pavilion, some other uses for that resident that wants to not go to the hard market plaza, but wants a green, more relaxing space, watch some birds, read a book. This could be more of a passive recreation. And you could build about 400 apartments up on top of the hill overlooking the lake. And this is a type of urban living that I can tell you is not in this marketplace. So there are some people who want to be right in the middle of downtown with the car horns and the sirens and the noise on the street. And then there's another group of people that want to be a little quiet, but want to be able to walk to it and be on Union Street in maybe 5 or 10 minutes. This is literally 2.5, 3 blocks from Union Street. You could be living in an apartment on a lake, watching the birds, and when there's a concert in Market Plaza, be there in 5 minutes. So this is something that doesn't exist in the Ring City marketplace that I think could really set you apart and really has a big return on its investment. So the lake and the park, maybe $500,000. There's a sewer line. They always follow the creek, so there's a sewer line that would have to be relocated. We plugged in about $1.5 million. So for a $2 million investment, because you already own the land, you could leverage a private investment of almost $52 million, which returns to the county about $367,000 a year, the city about $250,000, all told about $725,000 a year on a $2 million investment. So it basically could potentially pay for itself in 3 years. This is the biggest sort of bang for the buck return on investment of all the projects we're going to show you. So when you look at it all combined, so we've walked through all these projects, everything you see in color is sort of what we've projected out based on the development program that DFI gave us to start. Next. And so when you add all that up, what's the total projected investment and return? Comes out to be 29.5 in public investments, of which 12.5, almost half, is the big deck. That's the biggest bite of the apple. It could leverage somewhere in the neighborhood of $165 million of new investment, which returns about $1.3 million to the county, $950,000 to the city, and a total of $2.2 million annually back into the tax roll. So we're taking a lot of city-owned land, which the tax is zero, Annex City Hall, the Lakeside Living, right now that's generating zero. And when you put it back on the tax revenue, you get a really nice bang for your buck. So the DFI program was for ground floor, which is sort of retail restaurant. They predicted in the next 10 years between 80 and 100,000 square feet you could absorb, between 27 and 48,000 of office, and between 390 and 680 units of new downtown living. When we total up all the projects we just described, you end up with about 90,000 square feet of ground floor redevelopment. You end up with about 98,000 square feet of office development, but the biggest chunk of that is if that main user comes and fills that spot between Carolina Lofts and the Concord Hotel. That's if a big user decides they want to be in downtown and they bring all their office with them. So if you take that out, we're right in the wheelhouse there at about 28,000. And likewise on the residential, this number we just got updated today, the Liner building, we had projected that it would be L-shaped. Now it's just a bar. So this is going to come down to about 45, I think, roughly. But so you end up with 920 potential residential units, but as you can see, the biggest chunk of that is the 400 that represents the Lakeside living idea. If you pull that out, it's about 500, which again is right in the mid-range of the DFI market study. So we've tried to take their study and really put it on the most developable lots in downtown in a way that creates the biggest bang for the buck off your public investments. There are a few long-term projects. Please. One is, let's assume you're really at the front end, but let's assume that the county parking deck and liner building project works and the developer and the county are both satisfied with how that went. The county also owns another big parking lot just to the north of us here. And with a new lake up there, this might become an attractive site for an apartment building overlooking the lake, some office on the front end. Another example that we see everywhere is in that transition area between the built-up downtown and the single family is the townhouse development. You have a couple working their way through the approval process now. If those are absorbed and do well in the market, I think you'll find developers looking for spots to do that again. And then lastly, down here, because this site is so valuable, the Market Street site, and we're recognizing that what happened in the past with City Hall is, creating the annex. And even though these buildings are new and large, but you're a fast-growing city, that we reserve the right to build in the air over the plaza a bar office building that would be the expansion in the future to the police station or to the city hall. So you get the double value out of the market site. Even though we're developing it as an event space, you could also use the air over it to expand City Hall in the future. So that right is not foreclosed. And here's kind of what that looks like. So you would still have the terrace underneath it with the bleachers and different events, and then 3 or 4 levels of office above it overlooking the plaza. So we showed this to folks at the last night of the public meeting, and we were curious about how they would react. Were the buildings too big? Was it too much density? Did it sort of scare people? And what we found was that most people were very excited about the scale and amount of development shown. And when we ask about the direction, the right mix of amenities, public investments, private investments, how did they feel about it? And I think there was only one person that said, I guess it's okay, and everyone else was pretty supportive of it. And some of the council members know who that person was. We had a kind of crotchety guy that came to every meeting. All right? So implementation, like Jason said, we have a thick book that lists out in detail all the various steps, but I want to cover just what we call the 5 and 5, which is the 5 most important things to do in the next 5 years to really get the project moving. The first is to bring new life to old assets, redevelop the hotel, city hall, and former city hall annex in downtown, and create new office, retail, and residential units along Union and Market. That's well underway. I understand the Concord Hotel has transferred control to a private developer this last couple weeks, so you're already on the way to doing that. Next one. Here's the old rendering of the hotel, the annex, city hall. And then to redefine Main Street by creating a new Union Street streetscape that has big, wide enough sidewalks to encourage outdoor dining. I mean, one of the things is if people don't see folks out on the street, they think it's not as active as it really is. And so while outdoor dining seems like something we're really harping on, it really does contribute to people's perception of how the street is active and how it feels to them. So here's hopefully the end state of that. And again, we're not picking a exact concept. We'll let the council and planning commission and staff and public work through that some more. And then lastly, a place to gather. Create a new plaza and event street on Market that draws community and visitors into downtown. You know, we kept hearing about is it the 27 area code? I kept hearing in the public meetings, oh, they're from the 27, they're from the 27. I finally had to say, what's that mean, 27? And it means, oh, they're from South Cabarrus County, they're new people. You know, that's where the development is. And so when we ask, how often do people from the 27 come up here? They say, oh, not too much. And in fact, many times when you hold a public event, folks from down there will come up and say, wow, this downtown is wonderful. We didn't know it existed, right? A lot of people think Concord is the mall and the track and the amphitheater down there. And so this plaza is a real way to introduce Concord to folks from the 27, folks from Harrisonburg, points north, even Kannapolis, to come over and re-experience downtown in a new way. Here's all the different ways, again, that it can be used. And then lastly, not lastly, I think second to last, a new and expanded county campus. So complete the new courthouse master plan, more central county complex, including the new parking deck with this residential liner build it, and to revitalize somehow the old courthouse. Now, not this one, but what will be the old courthouse when the new one is built. We had some meetings with the county folks, and one of the things the city is worried about a little bit is, you know, courthouses really need to be secure, and they don't like to have multiple entry points. And so we just want to make sure that what is now the front door of the courthouse on Union Street doesn't become a blank wall and back door through which nobody can enter, because then that sort of deadens that part of Union Street. And so maybe there's a way when you get your architect on board and start thinking through it to have, you know, the Register of Deeds or the tax office, some way for folks to be able to come in and out of that building and do smaller county exchanges, you know, paying taxes or getting a deed without having to go through the major security that actually gets you into the courthouse. We did something like this at the Wake County Courthouse. It's not easy, but it can be done. So here is the sort of build out of the county courthouse campus. And then lastly, to get ready for business. You need some regulatory improvements, and we're suggesting a facade grant package that maybe you up the level of the facade grant while Union Street is under construction. So for a short time, maybe 2 years as the plan is being designed and constructed, you say, we're going to double the amount of the facade grant if you complete it before the street opens. So that private investment is incented to redevelop as the new streetscape comes in. And you want to align your development approval regime more closely with what the marketplace is demanding. And encourage new private investment. Remove any barriers that might be out there for them. Next one, please. So currently, if you've driven in downtown Charlotte or any big city, I think you've seen this. This is called the 5/1. It's 5 levels of wood frame construction over 1 level of concrete. So you have this concrete base, which is a firewall that allows all the retail and business uses to be on the ground floor, and then you have 5 levels of wood frame apartment over top of it. That's illegal currently in downtown Concord because of the primary fire district, which the city is already working with the fire marshal to look at, and also you have a height limit now of 72 feet there's a big shift. The reason you see this building so much is in the International Building Code, there's a big shift between a 6-story building and anything above 6 stories. One is called the low-rise building code, and one is called the high-rise building code. And that shift occurs right at about 85 feet, which is the length of a ladder on a fire truck. So if this catches on fire, the fire truck can come get you and you can climb down the ladder. Above that, you can't. And so you don't see too many buildings that are in the 7, 8, 9, 10-story range. You sort of see 6 stories or 12 plus, because the additional cost to make those safety improvements in a taller building necessitates that you go much higher. So what we're suggesting is that you align your zoning code and fire district to the low-rise building code going forward. So the next steps for us, we've pretty much finalized the conceptual illustrations. We're working on a smaller master plan document that's more easily digestible for the normal citizen. We've presented to the Planning Commission already, where the plan document is inside staff review, I think, for the second round. And we're going to make the formal adoption presentation to the City Council on August 11th. And we're happy to make this presentation to you today and would take any questions that you may have.
Maybe like we were pretty overwhelmed when we first saw this. Matter of fact, I think we're still overwhelmed. Once again, these are concepts. I personally think the broad framework is very good. Just a lot of, as anything, there'll be a lot of things to settle, a lot of issues, and I can sitting here thinking about every one of them. I think that, boy, this is going to present an issue here, this is going to present an issue here, and how are you going to solve that?
Yeah.
Because these things are never easy, because you're not building on new space.
Right.
But that's why it's downtown, and that's why people care about it. Obviously, the object is to maintain a good downtown, the things that people like, and enhance it. And I think one of the key words you used is added value.
Mm-hmm.
That's in dollars and cents, and it's also in quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
People, you hit on something that we all deal with all the time. People think that, some people identify, they think Concord is Concord Mills and the Speedway.
Mm-hmm.
As we on council, and I'm sure you commissioners, when we're recruiting businesses, and they obviously want to know about the schools and living conditions and so on, I have never, ever had somebody said, well, I really want to go see your mall. Not yet. Nobody's ever said that.
Right.
They want to see other things that represent your past and your history and again, your quality of life. What's it going to be like living here every day? And I think all of these things you mentioned are important to people that are considering coming here, and to us, all of us that live here and care about it.
So in the beginning, when you had the 3 different options,
Yes.
and the third option, I think you said the only one was in Netherlands, pretty much.
There's one in Asheville. I said there's only one in North Carolina in Asheville. There's multiple ones across the United States and in other cities, but it's not the most common type of street out there. That's
And is
for
that
sure.
because you end up with no parking, or?
That's
is that
one of the
what
reasons.
drives
Yeah,
that?
that's one of the reasons, and you really need to have a really healthy retail street before that occurs, because you want it to fill up with people. I mean, you don't want to build a 22.5-foot wide sidewalk and then have nobody on it. That can look desolate and be a negative. And so you really want to make sure that you do that on streets that are really active or prepared to be really active for retail and cafe use. Yeah. Let me just say one thing that occurred the night of the workshops. We did a little, typically we like to, rather than us come in and tell you what we think, we asked the local staff to organize a series of 5-minute presentations by local people that could tell us in the community why they really love downtown and what's important to them. And I don't know if Steve called just one of the folks, but there were, I think, a group of 6 young couples, 12 young couples with children that live close to downtown, but not all in it, that all came and gave a presentation about why downtown is important to them and why, they can't afford to live in a walkable, compact area downtown Charlotte. A single-family house on the edge of downtown Charlotte, you can walk to something that's probably, I don't know, $500,000, I don't know. But they really like that they can live close to downtown Concord with their young kids, bring them in for ice cream in the wagon, ride the bikes down, and I think you're really going to start to see a lot of young families sort of be attracted to downtown and all that it can offer. The next generation is a little bit different than ours was, in that they really don't like driving. A lot of them don't own 2 cars, instead just one. My nieces and nephews are 23 and 24, and neither one of them has a driver's license. And so, this idea of increasing the attraction of residential living around the periphery of downtown, not just the higher density stuff we showed here, but all the single family that's around downtown, I think you're already starting to see that. And I can say from my driving around, you really have some wonderful, fantastic neighborhoods that are close into downtown, and I think would be really attractive if the right amenity package was available for these young families to come up and take a look. So I was really impressed with these 6 couples that came and really told us how much they love living here and how much their friends, when they come to visit, are surprised at how that it's not as expensive in Charlotte, and all these restaurants and neat things to do are really close by. So I think you're at the front end of really developing that market.
I think we've all been very pleased with the young people that, from here, that have decided to stay here, and then the new ones that are moving here. It has been something that's happened in a relatively short amount of time. It's really amazing.
And that's the type of advertising you can't buy. When 6 young couples stand up in front of, the 30 or 40 people that came and talked about how much they love living downtown and all these things that attracted them, you got to imagine they're also out in the community talking to their friends that way. And, you can't buy advertising like that.
Can you go back to near the beginning of the slides where it was telling the breakdown of who was at the presentations?
Yeah.
You went too fast for me.
It's this one, and this one, yeah. So we had a good mix of property owners, some nearby residents, business owners, someone who was both a property and a business owner, and then a resident of Concord that didn't live nearby to downtown.
And did this one total how many people? This was the one that was 120 or something?
How many did we have that night?
We
About
did this the last night.
70
of
maybe?
the presentation. I don't remember the exact number.
60 or 70. And then the next one was how long they had lived here. So we had some folks that have been here mostly their whole life, over 20 years. Some that came in the wave of the 80s or the 90s, 10 to 20. Some that had just arrived in the recent past. And then I think this kind of represents a lot of that younger group, because actually they came after they did the first night. 2 or 3 of those members of that young couple group came every night. They came every single night to the meetings, which is, for a planner, you rarely see that. Someone who participates in a public meeting for 4 nights in a row. It's pretty unusual.
Can I jump in here just a minute?
Absolutely, ma'am.
I think all of this is exciting. Of course, you can tell by my gray hair, I won't be around to see most of this, but I think it's all very exciting. I do know, though, and have been around in the past, to see the emergence of our old courthouse as being the symbol of this county, when it at one time was considered something to tear down. So I hope we don't do something that, loses that. And this is more of a comment to the county commissioners than to the city. I don't know where the county staff is in thinking about the current courthouse and the new courthouse. But I hope that the decision there is one that is compatible with this entire plan, so that we don't just leave it because it's there, the one we have now, rather than consider how do we put that old courthouse building into this scheme to make it fit.
Yes, ma'am.
Because we've had issues in the past, which I won't go into, that, did cause some differences in opinion, and one of the reasons it did in the past was that people were not, or at least it didn't seem that people were as aware of what the plans were until the plans were already too far down the road. So even though these are wonderful meetings, that's a very small number of people.
Yes, ma'am.
So those are my comments.
Thank you.
And Grace, when you're talking about the old courthouse, are you talking about the historic, or are you talking about the present one?
I'm not talking about the historic courthouse. I'm talking
Right.
about the present courthouse, which would be, if we build a new courthouse, would then become the old courthouse. You have a lot of open space. In my opinion, if that big square boxy building was not beside our beautiful old courthouse and was instead somehow more green, maybe even just using, even if you don't leave the whole space, but if the county left part of that space as green space and considered a redesign of the new courthouse that gave a better facade toward Union Street. That's my personal opinion.
It's very exciting, and I very much appreciate the city's willingness to come and meet with us and talk about it. I did attend one of the workshops. It was quite interesting. I think that something that's different about this plan and the way it's being approached, in reference to what you had mentioned, Grace, was the fact that we are sitting down and talking about these, and how the courthouse and the county buildings incorporate into what the city's doing, and I definitely think that's the right approach. We've got certain things that we are going to be forced to do, and that includes the parking for the courthouse facilities and the new courthouse or expansion, however that turns out to be. And so for us to have the opportunity to talk about these things now and incorporate them together, I think is very valuable for all of us, and really appreciate you folks being here talking with us about it and letting us see the process.
Well, thank you for having us.
I wanted to just make a comment between what the city of Concord, what you guys are looking at, and what the city of Kannapolis is looking at. And with the growth that we're having in Cabarrus County, it sort of brought to my mind an old verse of scripture that I hadn't thought of in years, and it talks about people without a vision perish. And I just appreciate the vision, of the residents and the leaders in Cabarrus County for wanting to think far enough ahead to benefit folks that are old now that may not be here someday to enjoy this, but just like the things that we're enjoying now, someone had to think about it a long time ago.
That's right.
And so that's the way I sort of look at this. And with the parking deck, the area up there with the greens, and for all the open space, and just so much, it's going to really make Concord just a better place.
Now, I think Margaret's going to talk about another portion of the downtown development that's going to be coming up very quickly.
That's right. Good evening. Over a year ago, the city started working with Development Financial Initiative with the School of Government on the redevelopment of the City Hall, the municipal building, and the City Hall Annex. Since council had already adopted the goal of updating our downtown master plan, we worked with the School of Government to have them do the market analysis for the downtown, which set a great foundation for the market analysis for the uses in the redevelopment of the municipal building and the City Hall Annex. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tanner Dudley and Christy Raleigh with the School of Government to show you where we are in that process of redeveloping those two buildings and some of the current thoughts on the uses for those buildings.
Thank you, Margaret. Members of the board and members of council, thank you for having us here tonight. Again, my name is Tanner Dudley. I'm a project manager with the Development Finance Initiative at the School of Government at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm also joined by Christy Raleigh, who's our Associate Director of DFI. The Development Finance Initiative was founded in 2011 to provide real estate development and economic development services and advice to local governments around the state of North Carolina. The School of Government was receiving lots and lots of questions about how to deal with certain types of real estate problems in their community. So out of that, our organization was created to help assist local governments do that. We have 17 full-time staff at DFI with varying backgrounds in urban planning, real estate development, et cetera. So our goal is to partner with local governments to attract private investment into transformative projects into downtowns by providing our specialized finance and development expertise. And some of that includes structuring public-private partnerships, building reuse like we are doing here in downtown Concord, revitalization of downtowns, master planning and execution of master plans. We're currently active in Kannapolis, as you might know, to assist the city with the master planning there. We've also worked in other communities like Wilmington, North Carolina, to redevelop the Water Street parking deck in downtown Wilmington. We've also done a number of other projects around the state, including the state's redevelopment of the Broughton Hospital in Morganton, North Carolina, as well as community and neighborhood redevelopment. We have been active in Kinston, North Carolina for quite a long time. We also do real estate asset portfolio assessments, so a portfolio of a local government, how to hold, sell, or redevelop their portfolios. So the process that we typically follow in the communities that we work in, the process that we followed here in Concord is shown by this Venn diagram that we show you at the front of the room. We first begin by assessing public interest in the community. So in Concord, we work with the city to determine what are the public interests of redevelopment of these buildings in downtown Concord. We worked with city staff. We worked with a number of stakeholders in the downtown, the Concord Downtown Development Corporation, to understand what are the public interests of the community. What is the ultimate goal of redeveloping downtown, and specifically the two buildings that we were focusing on. We then perform a detailed market analysis for the downtown, which, as Dan had mentioned, was informed the work that they just shared tonight. That told us, what does the market support in downtown? What could be demanded in downtown? We then do a detailed site analysis of the two buildings that we looked at, which looks at what could physically be built on those sites, what are our constraints from that perspective, and also what are the constraints surrounding our sites that we need to be aware of. And we engaged an architect out of Chapel Hill to do that. We then take all of that information together and put together a financial model, a cash flow analysis to determine how do we make this project work. We take what the market could support, what the site could support, what the public interests are of the community. We come up with a development plan, which is at the center of this Venn diagram, to tell us what could be built on the sites. We then take that and go out to the private sector to identify a private partner to come to the table through an RFP process to redevelop the buildings. If we go to the next slide, the first building, as we've already mentioned, is the municipal building in downtown, the former City Hall. And the second building is the City Hall Annex at the corner of Barber and Union Street. So our market and our analysis of the market told us, as was already alluded to, that there's strong residential demand in Cabarrus County that you're aware of. We believe that there's strong residential demand here in Concord. We've also seen that there's an interest in downtown living. The Lofts 29 project just downtown has done very, very well. And we see that the likely highest and best use for these two sites could be residential, a mixed-use residential anchored project with some commercial space on the ground floor. And it's different depending on which site you're looking at, but given the iconic gem of downtown Concord and the Union Street corridor that you have in Cabarrus County, we think that retail space on the ground floor in many of these buildings could be very additive to the downtown and additive to the success of these two projects. So from a high-level perspective, we found that residential projects would make sense on these sites. So if we advance to the next slide, we started with the municipal building redevelopment. The proposal that we've put forth to council and that council has endorsed that we move forward with would be a demolition of the municipal building site with four stories of new construction there. As I mentioned before, there'd be ground floor commercial, likely retail space with residential units above, and we're currently looking at upwards of 55 units on this site. Given the size of the site, we're at about 0.4 acres on this site, and the slight grade change there is from Union Street to Market Street would be able to accommodate some parking on this site, with the additional parking for this building likely potentially accommodated in the nearby city deck. And if you advance the slide, you can see it's a very faint image just to give you a sense of what a 4-story building might look like. So the image in the top right is the view from Union Street, 4 stories of construction in place of the existing building there now. And then on the back, you can see what's called a podium, so you can park folks below the existing, the building that's built there on the back, which allows access to future development on the back side of of Union Street, along Market Street there, to accommodate plans that the city has long-term that we just talked about in the urban design plan tonight. So these are the conceptual plans that we put together for the municipal building, one of the 2 that we looked at. We then looked at the City Hall Annex building. Similarly, the blue outline is the entire site that we're looking at on the City Hall Annex site. We're calling for demolition of that site and 5 stories of new construction. We're talking about full build-out of that entire lot. Since it's only a 0.2 acre site, a little over 0.2 acres, so it's pretty small. It's narrow and requires maxing out the entire site in order to make the project financially feasible, which, as alluded to earlier, we're unable to accommodate parking on that site because of that. We're talking about upwards of 35 residential units that would be in this 5-story structure on the corner there. So a coordinated parking solution is what's needed on this site. We've had some initial conversations between the city staff and the county staff about some sort of coordination with the county's planned deck across the street. And again, the image that we're showing you here on the upper right is a view from the corner of Barbrook and Union, just to give you a sense of what a 5-story structure looks like. Again, ground floor commercial space, likely retail with residential units above, and then an aerial view to show you what it looks like in the context of the other buildings in downtown. So I guess just to pause quickly to say that we believe that residential demand in the county is strong, residential demand in Concord is strong, and that these are 2 projects that could be very successful and also catalytic to downtown Concord and Union Street. Having the activity of folks living downtown, spending time downtown, can have a very positive impact in downtown Concord. You also have a very iconic downtown Main Street that we see as a strong asset that this is only additive to. However, as I mentioned earlier, in order to redevelop the corner site of Barbrook and Union Street, a parking solution is required. It was mentioned earlier that parking is a very important of development, particularly when you're looking at residential development. When you look at a residential project like we're talking about in the City Hall Annex site, you need to have parking close by, which is why if we advance to the next slide, we think there's an opportunity to work between the City Hall Annex site and the proposed construction on the county deck site to hopefully accommodate for that. And again, we've had some initial conversations between city and county staff. So that was the presentation that I wanted to share with you all to give folks a sense of the work that we've done for the city. We are moving forward in an RFP process for the municipal building, the first building that I showed you, and we are in the process of working toward an RFP for our second building, the City Hall Annex, in the coming months. So I'll pause there and take any questions if folks have any.
Let me ask you a question, because when one concept for the City Hall site, there was a walkway down, so that in your RFP, I don't know how, I mean, is it pretty open that allows somebody else that might be the actual investor to have their own ideas? And they say, yeah, here's what I would propose.
The goal of the RFPs that we put out to the private sector are to include the public interests of Concord and of City Council. The important elements of what you all want to see happen on Union Street and on these sites will be included in the RFPs. But there is some flexibility there for the development partner to come to the table and come up with alternative ideas to what we've put together. We've had included a connection between Union Street and Market Street to help facilitate that connection between the 2 main streets in downtown. But we want to make sure that whatever is put out to the private sector has in it what Concord wants to have in your downtown.
Yeah, but if somebody is responding to that, they may look at what's been proposed and say, because they're more knowledgeable, say, hey, that won't work, but this will work. So for instance, I'm just using that as for instance, so the walkway, that's not a done deal.
Everything we've included is conceptual. So we've put together, using our expertise from a development perspective and what the costs are and what's required from the private sector in order to make an attractive project. We've put that into our model, and we worked with Tice Keister Architects to determine how could that fit into the site and what's been proposed to be built on there. So that's one of a number of different solutions that could be proposed.
Now, don't get me wrong, I like the walk, I like that connection. The other thing that we also are wanting to, as everybody's talked, we want to expand the downtown footprint to market. So the drawing you show shows the replacement for the city hall going all the way back to market. So that would take away, I mean, for that parking, that would take away any alternate use that somebody else might want to have some business, restaurant, or whatever there that would face market.
What we're currently showing would be residential units that would be overlooking a plaza in the back or other businesses that you have along Market Street. But yes, we would have access for parking below the building there. Doesn't mean that you cannot have other uses along Market Street adjacent to it. This was a way to accommodate parking on the site, which we think is important for residential, given that we have the city parking deck nearby, which could be an alternative for accommodating parking there.
And one of the other things that I think is included in RFP is also compatibility with the downtown architecture. So when you see those concepts, those are not the way the buildings are going to look in terms of a white building.
Those are very, very simple conceptual blocks, just to give you a sense of what the scale would be in downtown. A partner that comes to the table would have an architect that would put together a design that would be consistent with the design guidelines in downtown Concord. So currently, right now, Margaret asked if I would share a little information about the timeline. So from the municipal building perspective, City Council is going to be reviewing the RFP that we've put together at the next council meeting, which is next week. We will then publish that to the private sector. Typically, we think at least 2 to 3 months is required for a timeline to put together proposals for the site. We'll then vet those with city staff and come back to council for that with a recommendation for who to endorse and move forward towards the end of the year to have a private partner come in and do development on this site. For the City Hall Annex, given that a coordinated parking solution is required with potentially plans that the county has on the adjacent site, we've extended our timeline to potentially work on a coordinated solution between our site and the county site. I should comment that coordination of those two projects could create an even more catalytic project to create a lot of interest from folks both in the developers in the Charlotte area, in North Carolina, and beyond. When you get to a larger scale project like that, you get a lot of interest. So that will take additional time to work with potentially the county to determine what that coordinated solution would be and how parking would be shared and how the development across the two sites would be planned out. Likely 6 to 9 months to do that, with the plan to go toward an RFP sometime early next year, if possible.
Do you consider, or is it impossible to do rooftop parking?
On the City Hall Annex site, it would be very difficult to fit, given the constraints that you need for a parking deck on that site, it would be very difficult to do any sort of structured parking there. Given that there's a number of residential units you need to get out of the site in order to make it financially feasible, to generate revenue, to make the project attractive or possible. So I think that the only parking solution, as we've currently modeled it with over 35 units on that site, would be off of the City Hall Annex site.
So Tanner, what has been your track record? I know you've been in a lot of other cities. It's relatively inexpensive to make some really great looking drawings, but so what's been the real life? I know you got a very surprisingly positive response on the RFPs you put out in Kannapolis. What's been the experience overall?
We've had a very positive experience with projects very similar to this. I mentioned the Wilmington Water Street parking deck project earlier on in my presentation. Some time ago, a development partner, East West Partners, was selected by the city of Wilmington to move forward with a mixed-use project on the site that we did that same analysis for. And I believe the city's in the process of signing a development agreement with that partner to move forward with a transformative project in downtown Wilmington, which is going to bring a number of residents, over 200 residents, to downtown. We'll have a structured parking deck that will be wrapped with these residential units and retail on the ground floor. So we've seen a lot of success. That project is one example. We've also seen a lot of interest in Kannapolis in the project, as you just mentioned, in downtown. A number of responses from interested development partners, not only to develop on the site that was initially put into the proposal in Kannapolis, but sites surrounding it. So it reinforces the finding from our market analysis that there's interest in Cabarrus County, parts of Cabarrus County, that there's a lot of residential growth, and that many developers are starting to look to these markets to develop. We know that Charlotte has seen lots of growth and continues to see that growth, but we see that's spreading outward into communities like Concord.
I think the project in Wilmington, if you've stayed at the Hilton down on the river, that's an ugly parking deck right across the street from that hotel that they're trying to redevelop.
It has been an eyesore right along Water Street, right along the water, for many, many years. And if you can see the conceptual drawings that have been put together by the developer and their design team, and it's going to be a beautiful project that's going to have a lot of activity on the main street to keep folks coming to downtown Wilmington, while many, many residential units above it to have more activity in downtown at night.
And we've actually had inquiries on the two buildings from developers already.
DFI, we've had conversations with several folks in North Carolina, development groups in North Carolina, that have expressed interest in these sites.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's the end of our presentation. Steve, you thanked us. We thank you for allowing us to be here, and we really sincerely appreciate your interest in the county seat in downtown Concord and what we can do together, because we can really make this something that we're all going to be proud of. I wish we could snap our fingers and make it happen and be walking out there tonight and seeing it, but we can imagine it. So,
Well, it's truly gratifying to be in a county where we have these kind of opportunities going on, and we're able to have these discussions, and certainly with what DFI is doing with both cities at the same
Absolutely.
time is especially exciting. As we talk with other county commissioners and other counties around the state, that's not true everywhere. We talk about the challenges of growth and what we're having to do from a school perspective, that sort of thing, and a lot of other counties, and I've said this so many times, but they always say, gosh, I wish we had that problem, because they're in areas of declining population. And to be able to have these kind of conversations, look these kind of plans is very exciting. I'll say the same thing I said in Kannapolis a few weeks ago. Let's put away the colored pencils and get out the bulldozers.
yep.
And because truly it is going to be a great plan. We appreciate you being here again.
And let me say one more thing. Lynn, you were talking about Kannapolis and how exciting that is. So when I congratulated Mayor Hennett on their courage and what was happening up there, he said pretty soon things are going to be so good in Kannapolis, we're going to be hauling people from Concord up here to see what we're doing.
Well, I think for those of us that have lived in this community our entire lives, it is very gratifying to see the spirit of cooperation that exists between Concord and Kannapolis, and certainly between the county and those municipalities as well. It has not always been as good as it is today, and that's something for all of us to be proud of. Amen. I think, hearing no other business, I will go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn the county commission meeting, and I assume you will need to do the same afterwards.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have a motion and a second that we adjourn. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, no. We stand adjourned.
Okay, do I hear a motion for the city council to adjourn? Motion second, all in favor? Aye. All right, thanks
Great.
again.
Thank you.